The last thing I expected to find when I pulled into my sister's driveway that Saturday morning was her husband's car still parked there. He was supposed to be gone. That's what she told me on the phone 3 days earlier. He took a job offer out in Phoenix, she said. Packed his bags and left. Good riddance. I believed her because I wanted to believe her. Because my sister had spent 4 years in a marriage that slowly drained the light out of her, and I thought maybe, finally, she was getting her life back. But his car was there, and the front curtains were drawn shut even though it was almost 10 in the morning. I almost didn't stop. I almost just kept driving, told myself it wasn't my business, that maybe he came back to grab something and they were talking things through. That's what I told myself as I sat in my car for a full minute staring at that house on Clover Ridge Lane, the little blue one she bought with her own money before she ever met him. But I couldn't leave. Something in my chest wouldn't let me. I knocked. No answer. Knocked again, harder this time. Nothing. I still had a key from when she asked me to water her plants last spring. I used it. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The kind of knowing that doesn't need evidence. The air in the house was too still. The kitchen light was on, but nothing was cooking. A mug sat on the counter, half full of cold coffee. "Mara," I called out. Her name felt strange in the quiet. I walked down the hall toward the bedroom, and that's when I heard it. A sound so low and weak I almost missed it entirely. A sound that wasn't quite a word, but was trying to be. I pushed open the bedroom door. My sister was lying on the floor beside the bed. Her eyes were open, but she wasn't looking at anything, not really. Her lips were moving, but nothing was coming out except that thin, broken sound. I dropped to my knees next to her. "Mara, look at me. Can you hear me?" Her hand moved, just barely, like she was trying to reach for something. Her skin was cold and gray in a way that made my stomach drop completely. I called 911 before I even stood up. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I don't remember exactly what I said. I remember the dispatcher's voice telling me to stay calm, stay on the line. I remember pressing 2 fingers to my sister's wrist and feeling a pulse that was there but far too faint. I remember looking around the room while I waited. Her nightstand was knocked slightly sideways. A glass of water was tipped over on the floor, the water long since soaked into the carpet, like she had been lying there for hours. The ambulance came in 7 minutes. It felt like an hour. They worked on her right there in the bedroom first, checking her vitals, asking me questions I barely had answers to. When did I last speak to her? Did she have any medical conditions? Was she on any medication? I answered everything I could, but I kept looking at my sister's face, at how absent it looked, and I couldn't get my brain to process what I was seeing. They took her out on a stretcher. I followed them out to the ambulance, and one of the paramedics put a hand on my arm and said I could ride along if I wanted. I got in. At the hospital, they took her straight back, and a nurse pointed me to a waiting room with pale blue chairs and a television mounted too high on the wall, playing cable news with the sound down. I sat in one of those chairs, and I called my mother. That conversation was the hardest 30 seconds of my life. My mother made a sound when I told her that I will never forget as long as I live. She said she was leaving immediately. She'd be there in 2 hours. She'd call my uncle on the way. Then I called my brother-in-law. He picked up on the second ring, which surprised me. "Hey," he said. His voice was completely normal, casual even. "Where are you right now?" I said. "Phoenix," he said. "Why? What's going on?" "Mara is in the hospital," I said. "I found her on the floor this morning. She's unconscious." There was a pause. Not a long one, maybe 3 seconds, but I noticed it. "What?" he said. "Oh my God, what happened?" "I don't know yet," I said. "They're still running tests." He said all the right things after that. Said he was shocked, said he was worried, said he'd try to get a flight back as soon as possible. He asked which hospital. He asked if she'd been sick lately. He asked if anyone else was with her. Every answer was the right answer. Every reaction was exactly what you'd expect from a worried husband. But that pause, those 3 seconds, they sat in the back of my mind like a splinter. My mother arrived 2 hours later, just like she said. She came through the waiting room doors, still in her coat, and wrapped me in a hug, so tight I felt it in my bones. We sat together and waited. A doctor came out eventually and told us Mara was stable, but that they were running extensive blood work and other tests because her condition wasn't consistent with a typical medical event. Not a typical medical event. I asked him what that meant. He chose his words carefully. He said they were looking into all possibilities. He said they'd have more information in the coming hours. My mother gripped my hand. My brother-in-law showed up that evening. He came in looking tired and disheveled, like he'd rushed to the airport and grabbed whatever flight he could find. He hugged my mother. He hugged me. He stood outside Mara's room, looking through the small window in the door with his arms crossed over his chest and his jaw tight. "He looks devastated," my mother whispered to me. I nodded. I didn't say anything. They wouldn't let us see her until the next morning. She was awake by then. Barely, but awake. Her eyes tracked us when we came in. She knew who we were. She tried to smile, and the attempt of it broke me wide open. The doctor pulled me and my mother aside about an hour later. He had a different energy now. More careful, more deliberate. He told us the blood work came back. He told us that Mara had elevated levels of a particular compound in her system. He told us very quietly and very precisely that what he found was consistent with prolonged, low-dose poisoning. The word poisoning did something strange to the room. Like the air pressure changed. My mother made a sound and sat down heavily in the nearest chair. I stood there and kept standing because I didn't know what else to do. Prolonged, I repeated back to him. "You mean this wasn't a one-time thing?" "No," he said. "Based on what we're seeing, this has been happening over a period of weeks, possibly longer." Weeks. My sister had been slowly poisoned for weeks, and no one knew. Not me, not my mother, not her friends, not her doctor, not anyone. Because it looked like fatigue. It looked like stress. It looked like the kind of slow deterioration that happens when a woman has been unhappy in her marriage for years, and everyone around her chalks it up to that. I thought about all the times over the past 2 months when she told me she was tired, when she said she'd been having headaches that wouldn't quit, when she said her appetite was off. I told her to take some iron supplements. I told her to drink more water. I told her she probably just needed a vacation. I have never hated myself more than I did standing in that hospital hallway. The police were notified. 2 detectives came to the hospital that afternoon, a man and a woman, both wearing plain clothes and carrying notepads. They asked Mara questions when she was strong enough to answer. They asked the rest of us questions separately. They asked about her marriage. They asked how long she and her husband had been having problems. They asked if she had a will or any significant assets in her name. That last question landed differently than the others. I thought about the house on Clover Ridge Lane. My sister bought it 6 years ago before the marriage, with money she'd saved from her job as a physical therapist. It was worth quite a bit more now than when she bought it. The neighborhood had changed. Houses on that street were going for nearly $500,000. I thought about what my brother-in-law had said to me once, about a year ago, when I mentioned that she ought to consider her options if she ever decided to leave. He said, very calmly, that if they divorced, he'd be entitled to half of everything. He said it like he was reciting a fact. No bitterness, no anger, just a fact. At the time, I thought he was just being practical. Now I wasn't sure what I thought. The detectives left without telling us much. They said they were looking into things. They said not to leave town. They looked at my brother-in-law when they said that last part. He stayed at the hospital until visiting hours ended. He sat in that waiting room the whole time, flipping through something on his phone. He brought coffee for my mother twice. He was perfectly, immaculately normal. And every time I looked at him, I felt that splinter in the back of my mind push in a little deeper. 3 days passed. Mara got stronger. The colors started coming back into her face. She was able to eat soft foods. She could hold a conversation. On the 3rd night, I sat with her alone for about an hour after visiting. Ours technically ended because one of the nurses looked the other way for me. We talked about small things at first. I told her about a show I'd been watching. She told me the hospital jello was an insult to jello everywhere. We laughed at that, the careful, fragile kind of laugh you have when everything is too close to the surface. Then she looked at me and said, "I've been so tired for so long." I thought it was just everything with him. I thought I was just worn down. I know, I said. She looked at the ceiling. I kept thinking if I could just get through one more month. One more month and I'd have enough saved to get a lawyer and start the process. I kept pushing it. I kept thinking, one more month. My throat was so tight I couldn't speak. She looked at me again. Her eyes were very clear. You don't think it was an accident, do you? It wasn't a question. No, I said, I don't. She closed her eyes. Neither do I. I drove home that night with my hands at 10 and 2 the entire way, not because I was being careful, but because I needed to hold on to something. When I got to my apartment, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time in the dark. My brother-in-law's car had been in that driveway. He told me he was in Phoenix. He had a car in Phoenix, presumably, so whose car was parked at the house? I called my best friend, who knows about cars more than I do. I described it to her. Dark gray, four-door, specific shape, the logo on the grille. She asked me a few questions. That's a rental, she said. That's 100% a rental car. He came back, I said out loud, mostly to myself. He came back, said my best friend. And he told you he was in Phoenix. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my couch with the lights on, and I thought about the timeline. He said he left for Phoenix. He said he took the job, packed up, left. But his rental car, was at the house the morning I found my sister on the floor, which meant he was there, or had been there recently. But why would he use a rental? His own car, I later found out from my mother, was still registered at the house. It was parked at the airport long-term lot. He drove his own car to the airport. He flew somewhere. He rented a car and came back. He went to the house. And then what? I went back to the hospital in the morning. I told Mara what I'd found out about the rental car. She stared at the wall for a very long time. Then she said, "There's something I haven't told anyone yet." I didn't know if it meant anything. But she reached for my hand. "About 6 weeks ago," she said. "I woke up in the middle of the night and he wasn't in bed. It was maybe 2 or 3 in the morning. I went to get some water and the light was on in his office. The door was slightly open. I could see him at his desk. He had something in his hand. A small bottle, I thought. He was reading the label. I didn't think anything of it at the time," she said. "I thought it was probably allergy medication or something. He gets sinus problems. But now, I took out my phone. I looked up the compound the doctor mentioned. It can be purchased online if you know what to look for. It can be dissolved in liquid. In small doses over time, it causes fatigue, headaches, loss of appetite. It mimics other conditions. It is almost impossible to detect without specific blood work that doctors don't typically order unless they're already looking." I showed the screen to my sister. She looked at it for a long time. "He ordered things online all the time," she said quietly. "All the time. I never paid attention. I called the detective. She listened to everything I had to say. She asked me to come in that afternoon and give a formal statement. She asked me not to contact my brother-in-law in the meantime. I didn't. I went in and I told them everything. The rental car, the timeline, what Mara had seen in the middle of the night. The detective thanked me and told me they had already been building a picture, that what I was telling them was consistent with what they'd found so far. She didn't tell me what else they'd found. Not then. Later, I would learn that they had subpoenaed his online purchase history, that they found a transaction from 9 weeks prior to a chemical supply company, that they found the delivery address was a mailbox service across town, not the house, which is why my sister never saw the package. They arrested him 4 days after my sister was transferred out of the hospital. I was with Mara when she got the call. She was sitting up in the sunroom of my mother's house, wrapped in a blanket with a cup of tea she'd barely touched, and her phone buzzed on the side table. She looked at the screen. She showed it to me without saying anything. The text was from the detective. 1 sentence. "He's in custody." My sister put the phone face down on the table and looked out the window at my mother's backyard. The maple tree back there had just started turning, the edges of the leaves going amber and red. It was a clear October afternoon, the kind that looks like a photograph. She didn't cry. I thought she would, but she didn't. She just sat there looking at the tree. I took her hand. After a while, she said, I wasted 4 years. No, I said. He stole them. She turned and looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but still dry. That in-between place right before. You always know how to say the right thing, she said. I didn't feel like I'd said the right thing. I felt like nothing was the right thing. The case moved through the system over the following months. The prosecutor's office was thorough. They had the purchase records, the delivery records, the toxicology reports, the rental car records placing him in the state on the day Mara was found. They had text messages between him and his sister in which he'd made comments about Mara's health that, in context, read very differently than he likely intended when he sent them. His defense tried to argue that the purchase was for legitimate research purposes, that he was interested in chemistry, that the delivery address was simply a privacy preference. They tried to suggest that Mara's condition could have had other causes. The jury took less than a day, guilty on all counts. Attempted murder, aggravated poisoning. The judge sentenced him to 22 years. I was in the courtroom when the verdict was read. My mother was on one side of me, Mara was on the other. When the foreman said the word guilty, I heard my mother exhale like she'd been holding her breath for 6 months, which I think she had been. Mara didn't move. She sat very straight and still and looked at the judge. When it was over, she picked up her bag and walked out of the courtroom ahead of us and stood in the hallway outside with her head tilted back, eyes closed, just breathing. We didn't say anything. My mother and I just stood with her. After a minute, she opened her eyes and said, I want to go home. She meant the house on Clover Ridge Lane, her house, the one she bought with her own money before she ever met him. We drove her there. We sat on the back porch until the sun went down, the 3 of us. My mother made tea. Mara pulled her knees up to her chest in the porch chair and watched the sky change colors and didn't say much. That was 8 months ago. My sister is back at work now, part-time still, building back up. She repainted 2 rooms in the house over the summer, a soft yellow in the kitchen that she picked out herself. She got a dog, a rescue mutt named after a city she wants to visit someday. She calls my mother on Sunday mornings, and she calls me on Wednesday nights, and sometimes we just talk about nothing. About the show she's watching, about the dog, about nothing. There are still bad days. Days when she texts me that she couldn't sleep, that the house felt wrong, that she caught herself listening for a sound she's glad she no longer hears. Those days, I drive over and we sit in the yellow kitchen and drink coffee, and I don't try to fix anything because nothing needs to be fixed. She just needs to not be alone with it. I think about that morning a lot. The morning I almost drove past. Almost told myself it wasn't my business. Almost decided to respect her privacy, her space, her life. I think about the 30 seconds I sat in my car in her driveway, looking at a vehicle that didn't belong there. I think about the thing in my chest that wouldn't let me leave. I don't know what to call that thing. I'm not sure I need to. I just know that sometimes the only thing standing between someone and the worst possible ending is one person who decides to stop and pay attention. One person who listens to the feeling they can't explain. One person who knocks on a door even when there's no logical reason to. Be that person for the people you love, because the ones who want to hurt them are counting on no one showing up. I keep thinking about the moment I almost didn't stop. I was in the car, engine still running, and I told myself it wasn't my place. That she was an adult. That I should respect her space. I almost believed it. I almost put the car in reverse and drove away. And if I had, I don't know that my sister would still be here. That's the thing no one tells you about the people who do harm quietly, over a long period of time, in small enough doses that no one notices. They count on the people around their victims staying polite. Staying out of it, deciding it's not their business. My brother-in-law spent weeks poisoning my sister in her own home, and it worked for as long as it did because everything looked like something else. Fatigue. Stress. An unhappy marriage wearing a woman down. Nobody looked closer because there was always a reasonable explanation sitting right there on the surface. And it's easier to take the reasonable explanation than to ask the uncomfortable question underneath it. I thought a lot about what it actually takes to do what he did, not the logistics of it, but the interior of it. To sit across from someone at breakfast, to hand them their coffee, to watch them getting weaker and tell yourself whatever story makes that okay, that requires a complete absence of conscience, a hollowing out of the basic human understanding that other people's lives matter. He didn't lose his way gradually. He made a choice, and then he kept making it every single day for weeks. And the thing is, he was smart about it. He covered his tracks. He used a separate delivery address. He established an alibi. He knew exactly how to look like a worried husband when he needed to. Intelligence without integrity isn't a gift. It's just a more sophisticated way to cause damage. The mind he used to plan all of this could have built something. Instead, he aimed it at destroying a person who trusted him. My sister trusted him. That's what breaks me most when I let myself sit with it. She gave that marriage 4 years. She stayed through the hard parts because she believed in the commitment she made. And while she was honoring that commitment, he was using it against her. Her loyalty became the thing that kept her in range. What got her out wasn't luck. It was that she didn't give up on herself entirely, even when she was running on empty. She kept working, kept saving, kept making plans for a future, even when her body was being undermined without her knowledge. That kind of quiet persistence, the decision to keep going when everything in you is exhausted, that's not a small thing. That's the whole thing. And what got her out was also that someone who loved her listened to an instinct she couldn't explain and knocked on a door anyway. I think about the people in my life, and I wonder how many times someone needed me to just show up and I talked myself out of it. How many times I chose comfort over paying attention. I don't want to make that trade anymore. What I know now is this: caring for the people you love is not passive. It requires you to actually look at them, to notice when something is off, to ask the question even when you're afraid of the answer. It requires you to trust what you feel before you can prove it. Mara is okay. She is more than okay. She is building something in that yellow kitchen of hers that belongs entirely to her, and the man who tried to take her future away is the one without one now. That's not luck either. That's what happens when the truth finally has enough people paying attention.